Hey guys, this is Shay Jose, and I'm a DJ producer based out of Sydney, signed to labels such as Armada, Syrup Music, Enormous Tunes, and a few more coming up. I'd like to give you a breakdown of my latest track pictures that will be coming out on the 10th of June through Miss Monique's sub-label Killer Records. This is a new label that she's launched, in particular to focus more on the harder progressive and also melodic techno sounds that are going around. So what we'll do today is we'll just go through the track, we'll go through some of the main elements of the track, how it's been put together, in particular the low end, the ups, the leads, and a few other elements. So without further ado, I will give you a little intro from the break so you can get a feel for what the song actually sounds like. So that's a little bit of a breakdown, or a little bit of an intro actually, of what the track actually sounds like. So to start off with, I guess the main components around melodic techno specifically is it tries to use a lot of melodic components in a very minimalistic manner. That is to say, if you hear a lot of the stuff from people like Artbat or people like Anima, Tale of Us, who else, Colin, you'll hear that most of the tracks usually have a very anthemic style breakdown, and when the drop kicks in, it's quite minimal but quite impactful. So that's some of the major characteristics that I've seen, at least in this type of genre. Let's get cracking onto this track breakdown. So let's start off with the low end. It's probably one of the hardest things to get right, but it's also one of the most fundamental things within every track. So for this particular track, I think I've just got a single kick here. As you can see, this is a Production Music Live kick sample, I believe. And one of the things you'll see me doing, which I've been doing actually a lot more in my productions, is I actually tend to bounce the kicks into audio. The reason being, I like to manipulate the way the kicks actually sit in the mix with audio. A lot of the times I can make adjustments on the fly to a particular sample by either shortening the kick, shortening the tail, etc., to make it fit a little bit better into the overall track. If you see some of my previous tutorials, I've actually talked about the importance of being able to get your sub and your kick sitting nicely, and the relationship between when each of the transients actually hits. So, you know, either choosing to have a longer kick and a shorter sub, or a longer sub and a shorter kick. So you can check out my videos on my YouTube channel. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. For the purposes of this track though, essentially we just have one single kick. I am running it through Neutron 3, just doing a little bit of a bump around the 49 hertz, which is where the main body of the kick was sounding. Doing a little bit of compression. I've got the compression split here into two sections. This is basically to compress the kick slightly different based on the initial attack and also the tail of the kick, and also the transients. There's a really good tutorial by a fellow named Protoculture who covers this quite well. I've also done a little bit of a breakdown in some previous videos if you want to check that out. Besides that, I'm running it into another drum bus, a little bit of EQ, not a hell of a lot, just rolling off some of the low end, nothing crazy, and obviously setting the kick to mono. The sub is essentially just it's done by Pigments, as you can see here, and it is just a single note that is actually running. But the way that this is running is I'm actually ducking this out of the way through a sidechain. I've got some saturator on it, EQ8 to roll off some of the unwanted low end, EQing it a little bit more, and I'm actually clipping this sub. The reason why you clip the sub is you want your low end to actually be quite stable. I'll give you... As you can see there, I'm clipping the crap out of this sub bass and actually raising the gain, so it's actually quite a stable signal. This actually gives it a nice little, distorted harmonic in the background that you can hear. It's a bit of a fuzz, and then I'm slamming this into a limiter, and the limiter is really just there to kind of really flatten out those peaks in between the changes of notes. I'm running it through a fat filter Q3, basically just ducking it out of the way of the kick there, where it hits a little bit more saturation, and then into utility to make sure it's fully mono. Now, I also run a shaper box. I'm not using this plugin anymore. Previously, I was using this and then side chaining it to a MIDI trigger, as you can see there. I'm not actually doing this anymore. I'm using Nicky Romero's Sidechain 2, I think it's called, which essentially does the same thing, but the cool thing is you can actually sidechain it directly to an audio signal. So, or because I actually wrote this track probably about a year ago, all my new productions actually now are using this new plugin. So if I was to play these two things together, the kick and the sub, as you can hear there, it's actually pumping quite a lot, which is the actual sound I was going for, to really get that sub bass out of the way, but really kind of fill up the space every time the kick wasn't playing. And to really get this to sit just right, I did group them all together. But before we do that, we'll go on to the mid bass. So I've got essentially two layers here in the mid bass, depending on what part of the track we're listening to. Quite simply, this is just a preset actually that I found from I think it's Seven Skies. Fairly simple. It's just doing some LFO automation on one of the waveforms there with a bit of a sub, and I'm actually rolling off quite a lot of that sub end in this bass because we do have a dedicated sub above it. The second layer, if we were to move this a little bit further on, it's just giving it that extra bite at the top there. It's a little bit more plucky. Once again, something out of Seven Skies' pack. And I have no problems using presets, guys. I mean, why recreate something if something's already been made? I always do tweak things slightly though to make it my own. But don't be afraid to start using presets if it's going to make your life easier. At the end of the day, nobody cares how you did it. They only care how it sounds. One of the other things that I actually do here is run an LFO tool, which is taking off some of that initial attack because I was clashing with the kick quite a bit. Now, if we reroute all these components together into a single bus called the low end, you can see that we've got a nice little groove now happening. By also splitting up your mid bass away from your sub bass, it allows you to actually put this, make it a little bit more stereo, which I think from memory, I'm not sure if I actually did here. No, I've left everything under 150 Hertz in mono, but because we do have a few, check here. We do have a few voices, I think, on one of these synthesizers from memory. Yeah, there we go. Got 2 voices there. Just opens it up in stereo a little bit more, while still keeping the low end sub, the 150, 160, 180, around that area into mono. And what I'm doing here is just rerouting everything into a glue compressor. Just slightly compressing that to make that low end really tight. So that's the low end, which I think is obviously like one of the most important parts. The hi-hats, I believe in this is just some simple patterns that I've got as part of, essentially it's just some PML samples that I'm using here with, I think it's 16 hi-hats, which I created. And this particular groove, I actually took it from one of the Tale of Us tracks, which I thought was really cool. Not sure how you can do this in other DAWs, but in Ableton you can always load a sample, extract the grooves, and save them to your library, which I always do, because you can reuse it, and it's great. So once again, why reinvent the wheel if you can, use something that someone else has already done into your own productions. So give you a little sample of what this sounds like. And together with the second layer, it's a really cool groove. So they really complement each other in that way. Now we're running this just into a Waves API 2500. We're not doing a hell of a lot of compression. I always tend to turn the analog off because it introduces some low-level rumble and noise, which I really don't like, which when you're mastering, it really comes through, which is quite annoying. But I find that this is a great compressor on bus channels when you want to glue something together. We do have some other loops in here, which are, I think, just standard loops and some shakers. Nothing too great. This particular hat I am running through a vocoder. If you don't know, you can run things into a vocoder to give it a little bit more snap. We've got some overdrive as well in there, and a little bit more overdrive, and obviously EQ in the bottom end. So that kind of makes up our hi-hats. It's a really cool groove. As you can see here, I'm also running a lot of auxiliary channels. I basically tend to send a lot of my buses to either some extra saturation, some more parallel compression, some distortion, etc, etc. So it saves on CPU, which is great. I don't always do this. I guess it just depends on the track. All right, let's move on to, let's see, the drum samples that we have here. There's not a lot of there actually. It's just some snares. With a loop. I was finding that in this part of the song it was kind of lacking a little bit more groove, so I added this loop as part of the track, just to give it a little bit more swing. And as you can see there, it's only coming in at certain sections. So once again, some saturation, some EQ. A little bit of a tip that I can give you is if you saturate or you clip or you limit in stages, your overall master is going to be a lot louder at the end. Yes, you might be sacrificing some components of dynamics. So if you're going for dynamics and that's your end result, maybe this might not be the best approach for you. However, if you really are trying to get, a loud master and kind of do limited processing towards your final chain, then this is a good way of actually doing it. You can run a saturator. Potentially you could run it into a clipper or a limiter or some compression, and if you do that right in your bus channels, you're actually going to have a much louder mix at the end. Let's move on to the other main components that we have here, which is the lead. So this is extremely distorted. Once again, it was a preset. from Seven Skies, I believe, but it's been extremely processed. So I am running it through a Transit Designer, as I felt that he needed more bite in the actual sound. Excuse me. We've got some Exciter that is running here. If I move this across, and we're actually just doing work here, I believe, on the sides. We're not actually touching the middle. I'm actually touching the stereo signal here. So we're actually putting some saturation on the sides, anywhere from 421 to about 3K and above. We've got some ozone imager here to actually make the sound a little bit more stereo, because it was a bass line that I'm actually using. And we've got a effects chain audio rack here with some delay and some reverb, which actually is giving it that kind of grit. And if I was to open this, we are running this into some extra saturation as part of the auxiliary channels in here to Saturn 2. And we are running this into some shimmer and some drum bus compression as well. So fairly simple. The one thing I will say is, because there was a lot of low end rumble in this sound, I'm actually, from memory, I'm actually moving the equalizer. There we go. I'm actually automating the equalizer between when the track, so when this lead is playing in the break compared to when it hits in the drop. So if I was to play this during the, essentially what is the breakdown, you will see where this EQ actually sits. And now compared to here, and as you can see, that's specifically been done so we have that dirty bottom end as part of the break, because we have no kick or baseline during that moment. However, when everything kicks in, to keep that low end nice and clean, we actually swipe off a lot of that low end, anything below 35 hertz, just to kind of clean it up. We move further down. Some other components that we have in the background there for more like atmospheric basses. We've got a Pluck. Fairly simple. Once again, it's a preset. Didn't really see the need to change this. It was just fine. It's a PML preset, which works just great. And then at the bottom here, we have a drone, which just basically runs through the entire track. Nothing too exciting about that. We're running it through our Halo Shimmer, just to give it a bit more character and fill out some of that space. And that is really it, guys. I mean, they're the main elements of the track. We'll do another little pass through the break and the drop so you can hear it. This track will be available from the 10th, I believe, 10th of June, 2022. So if you do like it, make sure that you buy it on Beatport and give it a spin and save it to your library. Also, if you like this video, you want me to do some more track breakdowns, I might be doing a track from scratch in the next couple of weeks. I'll make sure I record that session and I'll give that project out to my patrons for free. Make sure you subscribe. I've also got a Discord server that I've recently started, so you can join for free. And make sure to check me out on Spotify at Shay Jose, and on my Instagram and Facebook at Shay Jose Official. So without further ado, I'll just play this into the outro, and yeah, catch you on the next video. Bye.